All right, folks. I want to thank everybody, whoever's going to join. We're just getting started. We've gotten a little bit, got my page down here, but I haven't revealed it yet. And we're gonna ink in this page. But first, I want to let everyone know that I'm working out the final details to go into distribution later this year, and very excited about that. So with that comes a lot of new art, a lot of new adventures, and new paths forward for the studio. I also want to let those out there know that I have pretty much got the most of the Kickstarter going for issue 3 of Luke Bloody Tooth, and I'll be updating that and sharing that out in the next coming weeks and such. I got two fabulous artists to do some variant covers on that. Nick returning from cover he did for issue 2, and Courtney Rose. You guys are all familiar with her. She's done some covers for me in the past as well. So really excited to get that going. But I want to get this going here, and I want to basically reveal the brand new retail cover for Ice Pick #1. It's going to be a remastered issue #1. I will be looking at going through the script, kind of fine tuning it, tweaking it, if need be, adjusting. I don't foresee that I'll be doing a lot of art adjusting or, really getting in there to adjust the art too much. But I will be having new covers for every single issue of Ice Pick going forward once I start launching a monthly series once I'm fully into distribution here. So I would encourage anybody out there to, feel free to comment, ask questions, uh, engage with whatever's going on. I'm going to talk about the tools I use. You can see some of them on my table and my processes and what I do, how I ink, how I, just go about doing anything with inking. And so let's just get into this and start inking this. Let's get this cover revealed and let's start inking this and see what we got here. So this is the cover. It's basically, talking about, it's a little bit of a story cover. It is Ice Pick kind of jumping in to save the day. It's kind of what he does. He is definitely a little bit of a hothead, kind of like, just kind of like a lot of people, to be honest. I'm just going to be frank and honest because that's who I am. And he jumps in, he likes to save the day. And with this cover, for those that have read Ice Pick, he ends up traveling to the ninth circle of hell. There's a lot of fire, there's a lot of mayhem, a lot of action. This issue is, my throwback to my love for 90s superhero comics. This story, this 4-issue story arc, is a revenge filled, uh, superhero story arc. Uh, and with that, a lot of what I wanted to do with this cover was to kind of give that city on fire type of thing, where literally everything's kind of going to hell for him. I'm not going to give too much away on the story, as I know that there's probably a lot of people out there. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that have not read issue 1. But for those that have, I mean, you guys understand what's going on. You know what's happening. So we're going to get into this. I use these Copic markers. I like them because they're refillable. The tips are replaceable. I have a .03 and a .05, which I kind of go back and forth on. I have the sketch marker. It's got the felt tip on one side, and it's got the fat tip on the other side. I have these really cool, they're felt tip marker pens, and they have this nice little kind of feather tip. on the on them, and there's a soft and a hard kind of tip on those, and you really can't feel the difference on that. I like to use those for larger lines. I typically will do most of my work with a 3, and then go from there. I also, I have a Olo marker. I got from, I remember where, Emerald City or something. They were handing them out. I'm like, hey, you get a free marker. So I've tried this as a black one compared to this Copic, and I got to tell you that I'm just not feeling the black on it. I feel that the Copics are blacker. So whatever ink they're using, I'm not 100% sure. Honestly, it's an alcohol-based ink, but none of these are India ink. As far as I understand, they're all alcohol-based inks. So there's a little bit of bleeding, which I can really kind of, over the years, I've been able to compensate. So, we're just gonna kind of ramble on and start inking here. You can really just see, the process in which I ink. Um, you know, I did recently. Matt Campbell put out a really good video about warming up, and I tell you, I don't necessarily warm up. Um, that's just something I don't know. Never really did. I tend to be very loose and almost sketchy with some of my detail lines. When you start getting into like longer lines, you can see uh, they they're less sketchy. But for me, that's pretty much how I like to ink. Um, it's the first time live streaming, doing all this with this new software that I'm using. So hopefully everyone out there can hear me okay while I'm doing this, and everybody is able to see everything, and it's not too shaky. I know sometimes when we're inking, when drawing, a lot of us artists are we can be heavy-handed. So hopefully there's not too much shaking going on. Got one of my favorite shows going on in the background, which is X Men animated show. Love that show from the '90s. So just checking in on the socials here. We'll get back into this. So typically, also when I ink, I will do a lot of my smaller line work first, which is really what I'm working on right here. I don't typically fill in my blacks as I'm inking. I tend to do those more at the end, and I tend to like artwork with a lot of rendering, as you hopefully can see. I know with the blue line it can be a little weird. Some of it shows up, some of it doesn't, but generally speaking, I like to have a lot of rendering with my artwork, and I wanted something kind of cool and punchy with the new cover. I wanted something that was that would garner some excitement with the character, show off his costume. This will be a night scene, obviously, the moon. So in the first issue of Ice Pick, I tend to have my stories really take place within a very short amount of time. For those that don't know, I'm a huge fan of small cast movies that take place in a very condensed timeline. I always talk about John Carpenter's The Thing is one of my favorite movies, and it still is to this day. And it's one of those movies that is exactly what I do with my storytelling. So I get in there, and I typically with Ice Pick is a little bit different, and since this is a live stream, I kind of have the ability to just you know give everybody out there the information about the backstory of things and elaborate much more on my process and the characters and things of that nature. And in regards to Ice Pick, for those that don't know, created him when I was a teenager. back in the late 80s, early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. I was in high school, and I it was right around the Image boom. Uh, Tom McFarlane's Spider-Man, when he came out with issue one, that really opened my eyes. Right before Image, obviously, but like that opened my eyes to a lot of what artwork, what comic books could be, as far as explosiveness and love it or hate the storytelling of that first story arc. But that was my first really deep dive into comic books and artwork. I started reading comics in the late '80s with GI Joe, and it just kind of blossomed from there. Going to comic book shops, riding up to the comic shops, checking out what's new, and just flipping through them and seeing what I liked. But with Ice Pick, I did definitely, that McFarlane Spider-Man influenced me a lot as far as artwork goes. And developing Ice Pick, it really went back to my love for Batman and Spawn, and Punisher. Even a lot of people have noticed that there's a Casey Jones influence there. So in the mask, the hockey mask, loose rendition of a hockey mask. Nothing too crazy on that hockey mask. Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're just we're moving along, and we're gonna keep inking this thing in. Uh, so yeah, a lot of it went back to my love of those characters, and I really did love the over the top uh, characters. I guess the anti-heroes. I don't know about vigilantes so much. I didn't really had when I first started Ice Pick, I didn't really have like this great idea for a story. I liked I liked a lot of the typical character development stories of how superheroes get their powers. I liked a lot of the revenge stories. So I really just pulled from that and went in and made up a story of his parents getting murdered, and really that wasn't even the first edition of what I drew with Ice Pick. That wasn't even part of it. That was kind of added a little bit later on. But initially, it was someone tried to kill him and left him in originally in like a meat locker, and you could see in the if you anybody out there that has the Ice Pick Definitive Edition trade, you can see I put in all of my old high school, um, college artwork, all the different versions of Ice Pick. I think there's three or four of them out there before I finally settled in on publishing issue one. So there's a few different versions of Ice Pick in the costume and the character, and just the general storytelling. A lot of it stayed the same for many, many, many years. Life kind of got in the way, and I stopped working on the character or doing anything with it. And to be honest, like even back in the day, we're talking, it was very hard to publish comics, late 90s. Forget about it. I mean, unless you had a lot of money, you weren't publishing your own comic. So for me, it was really important to, once I kind of had my life figured out a little bit more after college and kind of kids and all that fun stuff, I was able to really take a step back and say, let me develop this. And that's when I added in Ice Pick's parents getting murdered. That's when I added in some of the nuances of the storytelling and really felt that this is how I can make a good story. So for me, it was a lot of those early influences, character influences, and for me, a lot of the storytelling goes with I start with a protagonist. So for me, early on, it was also with growing up in like a religious home. The religious undertones were always there, and even to this day, I mean, it's still my family's pretty religious, and you know, um, I really don't talk a ton about politics and religion. A little bit maybe on my Facebook page, but that's more. It's a little bit more about just humanity and human rights and things of that nature. I try to adjust my opinions based on information that comes up, or try to stay on top of what's going on politically. But I digress. We could go all day on that. But growing up in a religious home really did affect me, with storytelling, with character development, and it gave me really this spark and the idea to create this character, Ice Pick, and Annabelle. And it gave me the spark to create the ultimate bad guy, Mordred. And my love of supernatural stuff, sci-fi, horror, all that really played a factor in developing the characters and the villains. And when I started writing out issue one of Ice Pick, I have on my YouTube channel, Dark Space Studios LLC, at YouTube. I have a series of how I made my first comic book, and that really dives into every single facet of making issue one of Ice Pick. I talk about scripting. I talk about penciling from the script. I talk about inking. Everything, coloring. There's a couple more episodes I want to do. I need to do the coloring, lettering, and the whole publication of making a comic book. But I dive into the story of Ice Pick in the first episode, with writing the script, and I always felt that what's better than the first. What's the best bad guy? And well, I mean that would be good and evil, right? It's a story as old as time, and that's how I kind of came up with Mordred. And I love 1981's Excalibur. In my opinion, that's probably the best King Arthur story ever, as far as in film. And that inspired me to kind of dig into what would be a good, bad guy, a good villain. And lo and behold, I come across Dante's Inferno, which was a big influence as well, because he talks about the nine circles of hell, and that's really where the story just really just exploded for me. It just, once I found that little thing, that spark of like, okay, here's a good bad guy, here's a good way to tell a story with good and evil. And taking in my love for all the things that I grew up with, all the things that I love, and I just ran with it. So the story from Ice Pick went pretty quick. Once I started writing it, I do an outline for each issue to kind of keep me on track, so I don't just go way off the rails. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then it just, as time went on, I wrote more issues. I started developing Annabelle with her own story, and Luke. I'm on issue 3 of Luke. We have one more issue, and Christian's just killing the artwork. I'm just really happy with how it's turning out. And that's a really fun, throwback to 70s horror, black and white horror, vampires and fairies. If you're into that kind of thing, I would recommend it. Uh, it's it's a lot of fun. It's not your typical, vampires are sweet, sexy, and all, lovey. They definitely don't sparkle in my world. So they they're kind of the scum of society, and the fairies, I should say, are the ones that protect all the magical creatures. And as the story of Ice Pick went on, and the story of Annabelle and Luke, it just really evolved, I think, and that's a natural progression for a writer, an artist. My artwork's evolved over the years. My writing has evolved over the years. So I think it's important to evolve. I think it's important to care about what you're doing, and fan feedback can be bittersweet. It can be a double-edged sword if you're maybe paying too much attention to what the public or the fans are wanting, or the pressures of society. You could really go down rabbit holes, and we've seen that with other characters. I'm not going to dive too deep into that because again, that's more about religion and politics. But I try to keep that out of my books purposely. I do. I don't dive into those issues. I try to keep my books fun, exciting, a very linear story, a story that has an end. After issue 4 of Ice Pick, it concludes like that's the end of that story. Issue 4 of Annabelle, end of that story. Issue 4 of Luke is going to be the end of that story. And for all the Ice Pick fans out there, all the Annabelle fans, they do show up in issue 3 of Luke. Ice Pick and Annabelle show up, and they gotta fight their way out. So it's a lot of fun. Issue 3 is going to be, it's looking great. It really is. It's almost the artwork's almost done. We're going to launch the Kickstarter in March, so be on the lookout for that. So yeah, I it's uh it's a lot of fun making comics, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun doing what I do, and I'm very happy with doing this and creating comics. Um, I definitely would like to have the ability to continue to do it as long as I can, and health willing and society willing. All these things matter when we're looking to do our passions and keep things going. But yeah, I mean, if you're out there and you're watching, I'd love to feel free to ask any questions, or let me know what you're thinking, because yeah, I mean, inking comics is just, it's crazy. It can be uh, it is a lot of work. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize that, and I can touch on that because the what we do with a comic book is, if we talk about like an individual page, you know, obviously there's a artist involved, right? Obviously a writer. We know all that. Um, there's anywhere from four, five, six, seven people maybe on one comic book. So it's a lot of people touch a single issue. I try to limit that, not just out of like control for stuff, but I limit it really for cost. I mean, if you have to think about that, you pay I'm writing them, but if you have to you pay an artist, you pay an editor, you gotta, I mean, all these things just add up. And as a independent comic creator, one of the struggles is always the financial struggle of being an artist in general. I mean, sometimes supplies can be expensive. We have things just getting away. Life can be a challenge, but financially, I just try to do what I can to keep things down to a minimum while paying all the artists really what they deserve, what they ask for. I'm not one to really negotiate prices down with artists. I mean, when I'm looking for an artist, it's like, hey, what's your page rate? Can I afford that? Okay, if not, maybe next time. So, that's just how I handle things on a business side. But we'll get back to the character and inking. These are like I said, the pens, these felt tip pens, and I like them because I can kind of like outline things. And this is where I'm deviating a little bit from what I normally do. Typically, I would just do all the blacks at the end, but I'm a little curious how this is really going to turn out being filled in black. I think it's going to really help once it's all filled in. And we'll just kind of move along up the page. Being left-handed does have its challenges, I guess, or maybe not, because I guess if you're right-handed, I wouldn't say that being right-handed is challenging. When it comes to being an artist, we just work opposite ways, I guess. I work from the bottom right typically to the top left, while keeping in mind all of the ink that has to dry. So I try to be mindful of that. I also, in my inking video, I did mention that I typically don't use a lot of templates as far as straight edges. I do use a ruler for a lot of stuff, but I do like this kind of loose. I call it a sketch line almost. It's not super straight all the time. It's not perfect all the time, and that's on purpose. So for me, life is not perfect. So I feel that, like, does artwork need to be perfect? When do we see a real straight line? I mean, I guess there are times, your windowsills or certain things structurally that have to be straight. But I think having a little bit of breakage in your lines and maybe a little bit of curve or wiggle in some of the lines, I think that, to me, it's that personal touch, where and I do my layouts digitally, so I totally get that. I will do straight lines and things like that digitally, and if need be, I will do them. I'll ink things in, pencil things in with templates, but I don't typically. I think maybe like for women, on like sometimes when you start going into like the thigh muscle, into the lines of a woman, her legs are very, they can be like long and curvy, and that can pose a challenge as far as getting that line nice and clean, and then also having the line weight go from thick to thin. uh, that can be a challenge. And I think I have used French curves on Annabelle's legs, but generally speaking, I just kind of freehand a lot of stuff. um, I mean, criticize it if you want. I mean, it doesn't really bother me, but unless it's like really, really something important, I typically just will freehand things. Um, so again, that's just my process. And the thing with comics that I think we have to keep in mind is they get shrunken down. So a lot of this wiggly lines or certain things, they're just not going to be seen. And since I'm doing this a live stream, I am doing things a little bit out of order. So like I said, I already filled in some of the blacks, and what I'm going to do now is like thicken up some of these line weights, because I know that that's something that absolutely has to get done. And it's important to have line weights. That's a huge thing, to have line weights. So yeah, let's get in here and do some of these line weights. And this is when I talk about changing your growing your art style, or just growing in general. I think this is one of the biggest things for me, is line weights, because I typically didn't do a lot of line weights when I was younger as an artist, in my early days is drawing. And now it's kind of like a very important thing for me to get in here and thicken up a lot of these lines, and make sure that that foreground, that these bricks really stand out, and they come to the foreground. And the easiest way for me to do that without color is to thicken up these lines. So um, they're varied. They're not perfect, right? These are bricks that obviously get weathered, and they get chipped, and things happen. So they don't have to be perfect. These smokestacks too. We're gonna thicken these lines up a little bit, and kind of do it like this. And then what that's gonna do, let's do this the other way. That's gonna help. And this is where these pens are really cool, because I can start thin and just kind of make that line nice and thick. You know, yeah, just really get in there, pull these pipes off, um, almost kind of off the page a little bit, with the thickness of the line. You know, that one a little bit thicker. There, you know, let's fill these in a little bit more with some black. I like a little bit more black there. And it's just adding some nice contrast into that. And I know since I'm going to color this, I kind of already have an idea of how I want to put all this together. But I think, that kind of works, and it helps these bricks to push out a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with Ice Pick once I get in there with him. And then I'm gonna go in here and do really my favorite thing, fire. I love drawing fire. I love coloring fire. It's just super fun, and it's I don't know. It's just one of those things where I just really really enjoy fire, drawing it, coloring it, the whole nine. It's super cool. So yeah, let's get in here and see what I can do. Just checking in. And I know that when I'm gonna color fire, I really have a few go-to brushes that I use and some fire references. So at the end of the day, like I'm drawing this in the actual lines of the fire, and I'll go in there and add some detail and stuff to the fire. But I know that like even once I color this, some of these lines, if not most of them, are gonna get covered up. So uh, and that's an important thing as a artist. Here's some smoke. We're gonna do that too. Actually, I'm gonna come up here and let that dry, just in case. These alcohol pens do dry pretty quick, but I always try to, if I can, give myself time to let different parts of the page really make sure that they're fully dry before I put my gorilla hands on the page and potentially smear stuff. Um, but I know that like it's important as a colorist, as with all facets of art for a comic book, whether it's digital or traditional, like what I'm doing, it's important to kind of add your touch to each layer, each part. And for me, when I color, there's certain things when it comes to like elemental stuff, snow, rain, fire, things like that. I have, I like to try to use photographic references. And I think what that really does is blurs the line between comic book and real life, clouds, stuff like that. I kind of I have you know some Photoshop brushes that are clouds, and I just will go in with those and fill in some clouds. So this will be at night. It'd probably be a starry sky in the background. Probably pretty dark. We'll have the moon glowing, and we'll get that once I start coloring it. We'll get all that going. And like I said, like so, I'm purposely, sketching these lines in here because I want it to stay loose. I want it, and I know that I'm gonna take these buildings and push them back with color. And there's a couple different ways to do it. I typically drawing a thinner line helps. So I'm not gonna thicken these lines up. I'm gonna leave them very thin. And also being at night, that can help. I can color these, even though I have this crazy fire going on. I can still have the fire there, and you'll see that there's a structure, there's buildings, but they're not going to be brightly colored. They're not going to be brightly lit. It's just using all the tools of whether it be color theory, visual tools. Like, I mean, we just look at things and we can see when we look at mountains how they look far away. So it's very important to use real life reference when doing artwork, whether you're inking, coloring, whatever. I always feel it's important to look at it real life to try to do stuff. I don't try to mimic real life. I don't do photorealism. I never really have. I like the comic art interpretation. I'm also someone that doesn't really do portraits. I never got into that. I don't do manga, anime. I just, again, never really got into that. So You know, I tend to really stick with just comic book art, and I really enjoy doing comic book art. So I kind of feel confident that a lot of that's dried up back there. So I'm just gonna come in and put my heavy hand down. That's something my high school art teacher noticed and never really was able to get away from that. I try, but it's it always creeps back up is my heavy hand. And sometimes I'll get like stuff smeared on my hand when I'm inking if I don't let things dry long enough. Back in the day, you know, like if you're using India ink or a quill pen or something of that nature, you can totally have like a glop of ink and it will just smear all over the page. I do also have kind of a little bit of a luxury of having Photoshop. I'm gonna, you know, if I need to, if I do really screw stuff up, I can go in and clean it up in Photoshop. But um, it's just one of those things where try to do what you can, the best you can at any given day. You know, you wake up and you're like, today I'm just gonna do the best I can today. It may not be the best ever, but it's the best today. And you know, that's kind of how I try to live my life. I try to do the best at that moment. Don't always succeed. Probably fail more than I succeed, but I always willing to get back up and do it again and try again. So, and honestly, that's something I take even with comic books and art. You know, artwork is never perfect. It's never going to be perfect. We can try all day, every day to make things perfect. Um, I just feel that it's never going to be perfect, and that doesn't stop me from trying. But here we are. So, anyways, Ice Pick's a fun character. Annabelle, we'll get back into and talk about her. Um, she's Ice Pick's fiance, and yeah, I mean, when he basically had an attempt on his life, she thought he was dead. So months went by. Uh, you know, there is an origin story actually for those out there. I mean, any new visitors or viewers, I should say. Uh, I started out announcing that I will be going into distribution later this year, and I will post who that's going to be with and all that fun stuff. Once I really finalize all the paperwork, I'm working with potentially a new printer. I don't know yet, but a lot of it is a lot of distribution comes down to the financial side of stuff. It's really important that all the financials add up and work out. I mean, none of us want to do something that puts us in financial dire straits. So it's just understanding the business side of distribution. So this is the brand new cover for Ice Pick issue 1 that will be the retailer um, distributed comic book, right? I will have all new covers for all the Ice Pick books that are going into distribution. So, you know, I would encourage everyone out there to, you know, let your local shop know, you know, come March, April, once I announce everything and get everything finalized. Got to get all the paperwork in. It's actually a little bit more than, I don't know if it's more than I thought, but it's definitely a lot uh, of stuff. And thankfully, who I'm working with is making things really simple. Um, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're going to be getting into distribution. This is the new cover. Kind of goofed up there, so we'll fix that in Photoshop. So it's a lot harder to talk and draw than I would have thought. But yeah, so I'm going to do that with the studio. It's important. I'm going to have Ice Pick's going to be, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a monthly book. We're going to do remastered versions of all the issues. I am looking at double checking the art, the script, colors, the whole nine. Anything I can improve on, I will. But generally speaking, I just want to make sure that the books stay as true to form as I can without really changing too much. So we're going to do that. Um, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping I can also do very, very limited variant covers or a variant cover for each issue. Again, that's going to kind of determine, I guess, be determined on financially how that works out with artists. What I'm hoping to do is have for the retailers, for anybody that orders 5 books, they will get a 1 in 5 um, variant, and for every 5 books. So I know that's a pretty low number ordering 5 books, but at the end of the day, I feel that's an incentive for retailers to order. I already have a variant cover that is extremely rare, but very few people have seen it, and I think that's going to be the cover I'm going to use for issue 1. So I'll basically have this cover here and another cover I drew that'll be a variant. But then going forward, I think I'm just going to have an artist potentially do the variant covers, and I feel it's important um, to have a low entry point for retailers. I know I'm not any of the big image guys or really even a big name artist in the industry of comics, hopefully yet. But I will say that being small has its benefits, but drawbacks, and those drawbacks is fan base. To be honest, it's very hard to get your eyes on uh, your book out there and get enough people, enough eyes on the book for it to become successful. A lot of us indie creators, we're really happy if we break even doing comic shows and doing all these other things. I, on the other hand, I'm not. I'm in this kind of selfishly for myself because I enjoy doing it, but I'm also in it to make money. Let's be real. We go to work every day to make money. We don't work for free. Well, some of us do, but I mean, we do stuff on the side that could be free. But generally speaking, like we need to make a living. And the reality of that is, like, if I want to do comics full time, I got to make money doing it. And the only way I can do that is one of the ways I should say is to give retailers a low entry point. Um, so that's why I think 5 is a good number, you know? Um, yeah. So we're rocking and rolling. We're getting the fire done. And, I let that go up there. Then I can come back down here and continue to work on these buildings and just really see how all this is turning out. I'm pretty happy with it so far. Like, I mean, like I said, stuff's not perfect. Life's not perfect, but I want to sit here and give the fans a fun cover, a a cover that really showcases what Ice Pick is. Okay, he's just a crazy, fun, over the top superhero. Bottom line, that's all he is. So I like that, and that's what I do. That's what I like drawing. That's what I'm doing here. I try to keep the artwork pretty loose, even though I am inking. Um, but you know, uh, try not to take things too serious. And I'm just rambling, so I appreciate those hanging in there. Hopefully, giving you something worth listening to. I got my animated X-Men in the background. Enjoy watching that show. Uh, you know, to me, Gambit and Rogue, man, that is the couple out there. And anyone that disagrees, I don't know if we can be friends. Okay, just kidding. We could still be friends, but still Gambit and Rogue. Um, and curious to see how the new Avengers is gonna pan out. I was trying to watch one of the trailers last night, and it looked very CGI'd, and I just wasn't feeling it, so I turned it off. And I get it, like the X Men show up in it. I mean, also for me, X Men are my jam. I definitely am a X Men guy over Avengers or any other team. I do like Wildcats actually quite a bit, but uh, I mean, for things that I don't know, there's just something about X Men. There's something about X Men that I just absolutely love. I know early on, uh, Jim Lee was drawing, Uncanny X Men and stuff like that, and then, like I mentioned earlier, when Todd came out with the Spider Man #1, Jim came out with his X Men series, and I bought all those as well. Super fun, but it's just there's something about it, something about all the characters and the storytelling and all the things that they had to overcome, the challenges, just resonated with me. So yeah, really curious to see how that movie's gonna turn out. For those that don't know, kind of a decent film buff. I wouldn't say I'm like a huge film buff. I mean, some people might say I am, but I do love watching films and music, listening to music. But a lot of modern movies just have not been hitting the mark for me. So I'm very skeptical about anything that's coming out anytime soon. I just, I know people can recommend, people have recommended a ton of movies when they find out, like, oh, you like watching movies? Well, check this one out, check this out. I mean, you could spend a lifetime watching movies, um, but it's got to be the right movie. I got to be in the mood for a lot of the movies. Uh, but yeah, I would say most recently, I know people have been talking about Predator Badlands. I saw um, it was an ad for that, which, to be honest, I didn't never even saw a trailer for that movie. Um, and maybe that's just Hollywood not marketing these movies as much as they used to. Because I'm not going to go online and seek out trailers. I typically don't do that. I mean, if it's an ad that shows up in my feed, if I'm on YouTube watching something, sure, I might, stop and pause and watch that trailer. But I'm not going to sit there and actively go out and look for movie trailers. But yeah, it was weird because like Badlands came up. I think it's on Hulu or something. And everybody's talking, ranting, and raving about that thing. I'm like, I do not know. I'm probably going to watch it out of, morbid curiosity. But to be honest, I have very, very low, none expectations. I think it's going to be a pile of crap. But we'll see. We'll see. I can say from the trailer, I'm not a fan of how much the Predator's running around without its mask on. I know that's subject for debate whether or not she should be running around with the mask on. But you know, the same people that did Alien Romulus, and I definitely not a fan of that movie. It just was not good. I mean, aesthetically, it looked great. I think it had like great production value. I mean, sound editing could have been a little better. I think there were times when the music was much louder than what the people were their voices, so it's sometimes hard to hear. And I saw it in the theater, so it wasn't like, I mean, that's supposed to be the ultimate experience. The audio was not tuned correctly, was not good. But yeah, if it's the same people that did that did Badlands, I got no expectations on that thing. I don't feel it's going to be a good engaging story for the Predator lore, which is kind of disappointing, honestly. We have so much source material, and Hollywood just can't seem to get it together, man. They just, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to make a name for themselves, so they end up making a 3 hour movie when it really could be an hour and 45 minutes, or 2.5 hour movie that could be a 2 hour movie. I've seen that way too many times. And it's just like, cut the fat out. We don't need all this. I'm sure a lot of you out there agree. Like, you really don't need. That's why I'm also curious about Avengers Doomsday, because if you're telling me 3 hours and 45 minutes, who the hell is going to sit through all that without running to the bathroom? And now you're missing something. I mean, like, seriously, you want to make it that long? Make it a part one and two. I mean, we know us nerd fans are going to go see it no matter what you do. So just make it, more accessible to sit down in the movie theater without missing what's going on. Or, I mean, to be fair, I'm sure a lot of those shysters in Hollywood are like, well, if they get up and go to the bathroom, they're just going to come back and see it again, so they see the part that they missed. I'm not a fan of that tactic there, fellas. Hollywood. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I know Lord of the Rings was long. I know it was great. People love it. I love it. Uh, Never read the books myself, but um, which I know. Hate on me if you must, but no, I never read the books, and but I still love the movies. I think my opinion on whether it be an adaptation of comics, books, whatever. I think honestly, it's just someone else's interpretation. So at the end of the day, I'm not like terribly upset that some of the stuff goes off canon from source material, but I do feel that we have so much source material. How are we missing on good storytelling? Like that's my point. How are we missing good storytelling when we have good storytelling to pull from? And that could just be old Fuddy Duddy Todd sitting there crying about films today. I'm just saying. My B movies growing up had Christian Bale in it, and they had Matthew McConaughey in it. I mean, our B movies had like A-list actors now, and I don't see any of these actors in some of these B movies blowing up as like really great actors and actresses in films. Yeah, I know. I'm just ranting. I go down a rabbit hole. So yeah, there we are. But we're working on his foot. Back to Annabelle. Yeah, let's get back to the story, Todd. Back to Annabelle. Um, Annabelle was originally in the first story of Ice Pick. She is seen walking down a alley that Ice Pick woke up in, and he was kind of wanting help because he like literally passed out, and his kind of the whole thing where your dreams really knock you out and do some crazy stuff. Well, that's what happened in the original Ice Pick story. And so he's kind of getting together, getting himself together. So she appears, and Luke is not in the original Ice Pick book. He was written years later, basically uh, when I was serious about doing Ice Pick and publishing. Once I wrote the script years later, I tossed in Luke. So yeah, there's that. And I honestly did not have Annabelle's story written until I was done with Ice Pick. So yeah, I was knee deep into Ice Pick and everything going on before I wrote Annabelle's story. You know, and literally I just was like, okay, I need something next, right? What's next? That's the thing that always happens. What's your next idea? What is your next story? So I went and researched. I researched my ass off, thinking about what would be a good villain. And I love dragons, so why not? So yeah, ended up making a dragon. Decided, hey, let's use dragon. So once I kind of decided on the villain, I had to really come up with a cool story about the villain. Well, for me, in my rant about good storytelling with source material, it's all relative here because what do I do? I look for source material on dragons. What do I find? Ancient Sumeria was the first place that came up with dragon and had dragon lore. So for me, I thought that was like super cool. And their dragon that they named was Kerr. And so there it is. That's my dragon, my villain. That's okay. And it's like, how do you write that story then? How do you what's it about? Well, what's a time proven and true storyline? Kidnapping. So why not? So yeah, it really I pull a lot of ideas and inspiration from everything. Film, TV shows, music, even things like that. Uh, I purposely I love living out here in the Pacific Northwest, and I gotta say that like when I originally wrote Ice Pick, it was um, it was kind of weird because I was like, where am I gonna have these characters live? Do I want it to be a real city? Do I want it to be kind of a pseudo city, completely fictional city? And I haven't really defined exactly what city they live in. So it's really a combination of all of those, where it is a fictional city, but it's based off living up here in the Pacific Northwest. And after being out here for a few years before I actually published Ice Pick, I it's crazy. A lot of people go missing out here. A lot of people go on hikes and into the mountains, and they are ill prepared. So they end up getting lost or they end up dying, literally, unfortunately, because they're not prepared. So I felt that like that's a great place to really cement a story. Location is a place where literally people go and disappear and have problems. So that's kind of how that started. I just really like living out here. I like the landscapes, how it looks, everything. The traffic sucks, but it's kind of how it is everywhere. Most places, I should say. But yeah, we're just working on his leg here, and just paying attention. Here's where I do these longer, as Matt was talking about, these longer curved lines, and I think you know he makes a very very valid point, and I really enjoy that video. Having someone else really go in and say like, hey, these are the things that you got to pay attention to, or here's things that I do that could help you, that type of stuff. And when he's talking about warming up, it's really fascinating because I don't, like I mentioned earlier when I started this live stream, I don't warm up. But what I do end up doing is I start with areas of the artwork that ideally become my warm up areas. It's areas that, like I started with the bricks down, down in this area, to where if I'm not drawing long lines, I'm not doing a lot of very precise line work. So if I have a jitter, if I kind of screw up a line, it's not going to matter as much. So to Matt's point, like I guess I do end up warming up when I'm drawing and inking because I will start in um, an area that doesn't carry as much weight to the overall piece as more important areas. Like I typically never draw faces first. And I rarely don't even draw characters first. I typically will always go into the background because if I screw that up, like it's kind of hard to screw that stuff up because it's almost interpretation, right? You could say, oh, well, that there's that line in that building that I screwed up on, but oh no, there it is. It's supposed to be there, right? And but if you do that on a face, yeah, you're not going to want wiggly lines on, a leg or arms or face. You want those lines to be a little bit more precise. So I guess by default, I mean, I do warm up, which is kind of interesting. I never really thought about it like that. So I know I'm talking a lot too while I'm doing this, but hey, like I said, trying to give you something to be entertaining, but always open to questions, comments, whatever. Agree, disagree. Let's build a community. Let's have a community. Indie Comics is a community, and it's for all of its ups and downs. It's one I'm very proud to be a part of. Very happy to be a part of it because I get to create stuff, and you, the fans, get to enjoy it. Um, but yeah, like I said, I'm pretty selfish when it comes to art. I think we're gonna wrap this up here, this live stream. I know I've been on for quite a while. I just wanted to jump on, try out the new software, kind of see how it works, how it sounds. Appreciate the feedback that everything sounds and looks good. Um, I think there was a glitch about getting my Facebook comments into the software, so I don't know. I mean, Facebook is Facebook. It's definitely a love-hate relationship. Um, so like this line here, it's a super thick line. So I'm just gonna come in here and give me this, and in one swoop, I have that line. And I also want to add, I want to make it a little bit thicker down here. Yeah, and then that's typically what I end up doing. Is I just will come in here with a very thick line. Haven't done it too much with Ice Pick yet, but but I will. And yeah, I mean, stay tuned. I'm gonna do more live streams. Seems like it's relatively easy to set up and get going. Be on the lookout. I will be announcing distribution, who I'm going to be in distribution with, dates, times, where you can order books. I want to make it as easy for fans to get books. It was always a dream of mine. I didn't really touch on it that much in this live stream, but ever since I was a teenager and I drew that first Ice Pick, you know, uh, comic, and the thing, those probably don't know, even my hardcore fans. I don't talk too much about it, but like I didn't even do a pinup of Ice Pick. I literally just started drawing the cover. I was like, this is the character, and these were my influences, and I just went in there and drew the cover. And that's typically how I draw. I don't. I do layouts. I definitely have refined what I do artwork wise, but I never did character models for Ice Pick. I never did anything like that with Ice Pick. Actually, I want to color this foot in. But yeah, just stay tuned, stay on the lookout. I will say also before I really wrap everything up here, I am offering Ice Pick issue 1 as a free digital download for anybody that signs up with the newsletter. And probably asking yourself, well, why would I want to sign up for the newsletter? Well, because you get behind the scenes, you get first access to all kinds of exclusives and things like that. You get notified, you get to see artwork first. So if you're a fan, I just kind of sprung this out today, but typically this would be something I would have put in my newsletter, and I would have showed everybody this and said, hey, this is going to be the new Ice Pick. I'm going into distribution. Um, those that are part of the email list, if you just go to darkspacestudios.com, there's a little pop-up that shows up and you're able to like sign up there. It's just literally just dropping me your email, and you'll get like I said, firsthand look at all the stuff, Kickstarter, stuff like that. But yeah, it's my newsletter is where I will be putting out first announcements on who I'm going into distribution with, and a lot of those details will go to the newsletter first. Dates of when you can order books, stuff like that, and yeah, we'll just take it from there. So appreciate you hanging out. There is the cover, and that's the new cover for Ice Pick issue 1. That will be a retailer cover, and that's going to be in stores later this year. And I also have the Luke issue 3 Kickstarter. I'm working on that. I'll have that ready to go hopefully by the end of the week, next couple weeks or so. At least enough that I will have the launch page, pre-launch page up, so everybody can check that out. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and I really, really appreciate everybody hanging out for, I don't know, however long I've been doing this. It's been a lot of fun. About an hour. I would say, be on the lookout, and I will see you on the next live stream.